Hello, this is Sean Murphy. I'm going to do a demonstration of how you set up a VNet device with the VLink system, how you install the network drivers, and how you set up the all the network settings for this. So basically in front of me you see a VNet device. And this one is one of the ones with the internal fan that cools the base. It's typically used with data loggers with internal sensors. So this is the DL2000. This is an old demo unit from a long time ago. On the VNet device, you have a network jack. This is a RJ45 female connector. You have a 12-volt power connector. Some of the VNets will be sold with the power adapter. Depends on whether you're connecting to a PoE-enabled switch or not. PoE will actually provide the power for the VNet module through the Cat5 or Cat6 cabling. Over here, you're going to see the power and the comms. These are indicators that tell you what's going on inside the data logger itself. So when it's communicating back and forth, you're going to get a little flash of the green LED. And power tells you what's on. So basically this is connected to a PoE switch at this point. So there's also a couple other things on the data log, on the VNet device. One is the model number of the VNet, which is a CDL VNet P. That corresponds to the model that has the internal fan, and it also has a notch on the inside of here that only allows it to accept devices that have internal sensors. You also see over here two lines on here. First one says MAC and the other one says SN. MAC is the MAC address. That's the actual physical hardware address of the network adapter. And all those digits there, it's an alphanumeric. It's actually a hexadecimal number, but you don't really need to know that. All you need to know is it's a mixture of letters and numbers. Serial number, that's the serial number of this VNet device. Over here, this is a sticker that I put on here. This is basically the IP address for this particular VNet device that has been assigned. In order to set this up, the most efficient way of handling the addressing of these devices without having to go into the device and configure it, which is a much longer process for each one of these. You basically need to set up a small network to discover these devices and then assign their IP addresses. The easiest way to deal with IP addressing and assignment of these devices is to actually get the IP address from your IT department. So basically, you do what they call an IP reservation. So you give the MAC address number that you see over here for every one of these VNet devices to the IT department, and they should give you back a list of the MAC address and the IP address that they've reserved for it. That makes this super easy for doing the configuration work, because when the DHCP reservation is already set up inside the network itself, so in other words, when this device connects in here, it basically sends out a signal to your main DHCP server saying, give me an IP address. And since it already has this MAC address assigned to this IP address, it's always going to give you the same IP address back. And that's an automatic configuration in here. So basically, when IT gives you address reservations, your installation of the VNet is nothing more than actually taking the jack and plugging it on the inside of here. So simple as plugging it in. And you'll hear the fan whir as it first starts up. It'll start blinking. It goes through its boot routine. And then you'll see these other lights that are over here. That green, when it's a constant flash, it's always the same. It gives you an indication that it's probably not connected and still just trying to make a call. But when you get a randomness to the flashing, that is an indication that it's actually sending data back and forth. So this VNet is all connected up to the network. So the next step is to actually go in and add the driver for this device, taking note of the IP address and the MAC address. So you want to maintain a spreadsheet, basically, of all these devices. If you're deploying a large system, trying to keep track of this on a piece of scratch paper is not the way to do it. A laptop with a spreadsheet that keeps as a column for the IP address, a column for the MAC address, and also columns for the data logger devices. With the VNet, it's always one-to-one. So basically, you're going to have one data logger serial number. This is a really old data logger. The serial numbers look a lot different today. Just to give you an idea how robust these systems are, this data logger is from 2011, and it's now 2021. So it's it's still in operation today with the original battery that's in it. So testament that these actually have 10-year batteries. And this device just snaps right on the top of it. You can see the little button over here, and in my case, all I have is a pair of pliers down here. It just pops off. You'll see that there's little pins along the back over here. This is the socket. The pins are all inside of here. And basically, you'll see a little sticker here that says up. This means when you're mounting it on the wall should be this way. So and this has to do with the airflow through the fan. The most efficient way to run the air. So it has two little notches here, two little notches here, and this little clip here holds it in place. Pop it in there, snaps in. If you have any problems trying to snap this in place, be very careful, because if you try and force the unit into place, you can actually bend these little pins. It's something to be very, very aware of, especially if you're doing a large number of these installations. The worst case scenario is you might have to straighten the pins out. So now the way this actually functions is that you'll see this device has this port down here in the bottom and this port here in the top. They're actually the same serial port. This is a DB9 serial port, and this is just the same type of serial connection, except for it's going into this network adapter rather than going through an RS-232 cable into either a USB or another type of port server. We'll do another video when we get into port servers that actually use this connector to connect the data logger. The next step in the process for setting up a VNet is to log directly into the device. So basically, we've obtained the IP address earlier. So you take your standard web browser. In this case, I'm using Chrome. Type in the IP address, and it'll pop up a sign-in message. With VNet devices, it's always going to be root and DBPS for the password. You can actually go inside the device and change this, but by default, this is going to be your username and password. Click sign in, and the device will communicate with the VNet device. The first thing you see here is the system summary. It tells you what the device name is, and it's VNet, and this is the serial number. This will tell you the IP address. This is all the information that's coming to you from your DHCP server, along with the MAC address. And it will also tell you what the model number is and the version. And of course, down here at the bottom, will tell you what the serial number is again. You're always going to see the device name unless you modify it. It should be the same. And you'll see a series of different tabs over here. The ones that are of interest are the ones that say Ethernet, IP, and the option down here for power. And when I click on IP settings, it will pop up automatically configured the IP settings using DHCP. And it also will give me the net bias name here. If you have a VNet that has external power and you notice that the power is not lighting up anything when you're turning it on and plugging it into PoE power or plugging into a line power, you may have to come in here and turn on the 15 volt power. This will also tell you what the fan speed is and the power supply voltage. This is telling me it's 48.2 volts. If it's anywhere between 45 and 50 volts, that generally means you're connecting the VNet to PoE. PoE is roughly 50 volts. If it's connected using the plug, the power plug that's available for the VNet, it's going to be closer to 15 volts. So this gives you feedback on the power. The next section to look at is the security section. This is if you want to change the password for the device. This is if you want unique passwords for every VNet device for security purposes. Now, the information about the login password and username combination is generally public information. You can get the information off a manual. So it's recommended that you change the password. Of course, that creates the responsibility to keep track of all the passwords for the device. You can always reset the device to clear the password, but then again, you're doing a complete reinstallation of the VNet device, and you have to reconfigure its IP address and all that if you go through that to clear out the password and go back to defaults. So I highly recommend if you change the password that you document it. The last option on here is more or less used for maintenance purposes. Let's say you want to restart the VNet device. You can type in the IP address here, and under restart device, you have the ability to restart it. One of the other options with the VNet device is the Ethernet settings. This is actually your network card settings. With the VNets only support 10 base T or 10 megabits per second. And it supports it in two different modes, either half duplex or full duplex. So one of the considerations that's necessary when you're setting up the VNet on a computer network is that the computer network switch that you're connecting to needs to be able to support 10 base T speeds. So, and also the duplex mode, whether it's half or full duplex. So that's this is an IT requirement that your switch support either half duplex or full duplex. By default, the unit's going to be configured for half duplex. And device name, if you want to change the name of the device, you can. Not that the device name here is of any particular use when it comes to ViewLink, but you can actually put a name to this device. By default, it's going to be VNet and the serial number. So you can go in here and edit this if you want to. Now that we've actually gone through and verified the settings inside of the VNet device, the next step is to actually get this device that you're communicating with from whether it's a local laptop or whether you're on the server, you're accessing this device through a web UI. So you're talking to it through a port 80. Now, what you need to do next is to actually install a driver on the server that maps this network device to that computer. So basically, the server is going to talk to this VNet device on this IP address, and then access the serial information that's accessible through the serial port on the VNet. So serial port settings, this is port 771 and raw TCP port 9761. The main one that you need to have open is the 771, because we use the real port settings for the VNet device. So essentially, this is an important thing for IT to know, that port 771 needs to be open bidirectionally from the server to the VNet. So if there's any virtual LANs that are set up in there, it can't block 771. So this here is just a reminder. There's nothing really to change on here. And I would not recommend trying to change this port, because you're just going to create problems for yourselves in the future by, configuring your system with non-standard ports. So that's what the serial port settings are. And what this is actually the conduit in which RS-232 information flows from the data logger and the server back and forth. And when we get to the next step, I'll show you how this is relayed through a COM port on the server. The next step in the process is to log into your ViewLink server. This next step involves installing a driver onto the server for hosting the VNet's connection to the ViewLink database. So here I am logged into the server. This is the actual server that the application ViewLink runs in. And there's a couple of different things that you're going to want to be able to access. One is the installation software that comes with the ViewLink system. It's an application that's comes on the disk. This is a whole folder. It has several different files in it. Setup is what you want to run. There's also copies of all the installation manuals on here, and there's also shortcuts that can get you to different parts of the installation program directly. There's also a device discovery tool that's built into the system. This will install locally on your machine. However, it's not as useful as you would think it would be. So over here, this is the application you're going to want to run, which is Setup. And when you launch Setup, it will pop up this little screen. This little screen has several different things that are in it. One is a macro to install the device discovery tool that I just mentioned. That typically it's not going to be all that useful for you. The others are all active. So in other words, every time that you go to install a new VNet or new Digi device, you're going to have to launch this directly from the file folder. So, I mean, you can create a shortcut to the desktop to run the setup program, but it's not necessarily do that. You just need to know where on the server you're storing your drivers, because every time you go back to add a new device to the system, you're going to have to get to the operating system and launch these programs over and over again. So with the VNet, it has its own macro to start it. And also the Digi has its own macro. It's important to make sure that you select the correct one, because there's a slight difference between the settings between a VNet and a Digi. So the unit won't be optimized if it's not connected properly using the correct setup program. So since we have a VNet, we're going to launch the VNet real port setup. And if you take a look over here on the right-hand side, I have Device Manager running. Now, Device Manager is the actual interface that hosts the ports and network adapters and multi-port serial adapters. By default, you'll see the ports showing up on here, but once you start installing VNets and Digis, you'll see this new section that contains all the multi-port serial adapters. So this is the back end piece that connects the VNets to the ViewLink server. So basically the multi-port serial adapter, that is your VNet. That's the physical VNet or physical Digi device. The ports, these are the virtual ports that are created by the driver that we're about to install that map
this device over here, these physical VNets, to serial ports on the server that the software can talk to. So basically, when you're configuring a data logger on the ViewLink system, you're setting it up to talk to a COM port, not an IP address. So this interface here, maps the two together between an IP address and a COM port. With a VNet, it's always going to be one-to-one. You're always going to have one IP address associated with a COM port. With multi-port Digis, you'll have one IP address, and depending on the number of ports that Digi has, each one of those individual ports will have a separate COM address. And with Digis, they're always going to be one after the other. So in this part, I'm going to just get into the details with the VNet. In another section, I'll be going over the details with multi-port Digis. So with this window open and this window open, I'll be monitoring in the device manager window what happens as I go through the software development. Now, this particular demonstration system already has a lot of hardware installed on here. And you can see over here, I have lots of COM ports that are installed. I'm going to go into VNet real port setup, and this all launches as a command. You will notice that it says up here, Digi real port setup wizard. It'll be the same whether it's a VNet or a Digi device. So basically the driver installation program is from Digi for both of them. So you will see the several different options available. One is to add a new device. The next is to remove an existing device or update the software on the device. What you're going to want to click is to add a new device. You would click remove existing device. If, for example, you were removing a VNet or a Digi device from the system and you wanted to remove the device driver. This is one way to do it. So I'm going to click on add new device. Click next. Now this is going to go through and it's going to find all devices that have been configured that are actually available on the local subnet. Now you're seeing basically all the devices that come back with that are identified on the local subnet that are Digi devices or VNet devices. So you see a summary over here of all the IP addresses. These are the DHCP assigned addresses, and these are the MAC addresses associated with it. So this is the byproduct of having IT create a MAC address reservation for all your hardware. And this is the model of device. This is also will return both Digis and VNets. So it's really the same interface or the same software that's used for both. There's a difference in the settings between the two. It's the reason why there's a different process for setting up a Digi port server that has multiple ports versus a one-to-one COM port to network driver that's found with the VNets. VNets are always going to have the model number with the CDL VNet, and they'll either be LP, LPC, or PC, depending on whether it's the model that has the internal fan or it's the model with external power. There's several different versions of the product. So you'll see this showing up on here. This whole tool here will only scan the local subnet. So in most cases, your server is not going to be on the same subnet as your Digi devices or your VNet devices. So basically, when you look at if you were to actually, in a real world case, log in, you would not see anything listed on here because it would be outside of the range of the subnet for your server. In this case, this is a demo system, so it just happens to be that they're both on the same subnet. In real life, the server that's running your ViewLink system is most likely not on the same site as the hardware, and it might not be on any site that has hardware. A lot of times these are in server farms or even leased space on a virtual machine in the cloud. So the procedure that I'm going to walk through you with this is going to be the procedure would be done in the field where you do not have the ability to see the hardware directly. So this is going to be the device not listed option that's on here. So basically in the real world, you're not going to see anything show up on here. So you're going to have to manually enter in the information. So I'm going to click on device not listed, click next. And this is basically a blank configuration field. So it's saying standard real port device. And over here, I'm going to enter in the IP address that we got from IT for the VNet device, which is 10.0.0.13. And you'll see there's several different settings that are on here. One is real port TCP. This is the port that I was talking about before with a 771 when we're looking at the VNet in detail in the configuration. This is the port that this server is going to call out on to look for the VNet device. The way the communication always works is always initiates with the server, and the server needs to be able to see the IP address of the device. So this port needs to be open all the way to the device. And you'll see two other settings over here. One is the COM port settings. It'll give you the number of ports. Number of ports is the number of serial ports that are hosted by the network adapter. With the VNet, it's always one-to-one. As I showed you earlier with the serial ports on the bottom of the data logger that snaps in, that's that actual COM port is associated with that serial port. And this is where it's saying starting COM. That means what COM port number do you want to assign this particular device to? And it says starting COM because with multi-port adapters, the digis, they'll actually be up to 16 different ports. So the starting port will be, they always program themselves one right after the other. So if you have COM port, if you're starting with COM port 1 and going several more COM ports, this will be the lowest COM port. But with the VNet, I'm going to want to program this in as being COM port 33. Okay, so now we have one port. Now it goes through and adds a driver. Okay, now I'm getting the screen saying, congratulations, it's installed a Digi port driver on my server. Click finish. And you'll see the command window go through and give you a summary of what's been installed and what already exists inside your system. The important thing here is to look through the list here and make sure you haven't repeated any COM ports or IP addresses in here. It won't let you repeat the COM port number very easily because it filters out the COM ports that are not available, but it will allow you to duplicate an IP address. So just be very aware that if you already have a driver installed for a device, don't make the mistake of installing the same driver twice. So press any key to continue. And any key means any key like enter. And now it'll go through. It takes a few seconds for it to refresh the software installation program, but then it resets itself for you to actually go in and install another device driver. So the idea is typically when you're configuring these things, you're going to do one after another, after another, after another. Okay, now that we've actually gone through and installed the driver, I'm going to give you a little bit insight into how Device Manager actually operates with actual devices. So as I mentioned earlier, there's the multi-port serial adapter and the ports, the COM port section for the Device Manager. Now, we had just installed a device on IP 10.0.0.13. That's a VNet, and it's mapped with a COM port that's COM33. So on this system here, we should actually be able to see and interact with that virtual COM port driver. So when I take a look at multi-port serial adapters, I will actually see on the list standard VNet device number 4. And this maps to 10.0.0.13. And if I take a look at it, I can see all the different settings that are in here, including a little link. It'll tell me what the IP address is with the COM port, TCP port is, and the link to the UI that we used originally to set up the device. It'll also tell you as the device is communicating back and forth, whether it's connected or disconnected. So this tells me that it's actually communicating. Also, if I click on properties, I can get onto the section that tells me it's COM33. And if I actually go to rename ports, this gives me the ability to change that port if I need to do that for some reason. So you have the ability to actually modify these COM ports on the fly directly from the operating system. Typically people don't do this, but you have the ability to go in here and modify any one of the settings that are in here. So whoever has management capability on the system has the ability to do some modifications to the drivers afterwards. The next section to look at is COM ports. So each one of these is the actual serial port that's used to communicate with it. And you can see down here in the bottom, the last one is the last device that we installed, which is the COM33 for the data logger device. And this will tell me what the default COM port settings are on this. This is not really important to note because it's automatically set up with a VNet device. So there's really nothing to tweak on this outside of the fact that it exists as being the virtual COM port on the server. So that's really all that you can glean from this interface. Again, you have to be logged into the server as a manager.